She had worn his mark for 3 years. 3 years of standing beside him at every pack summit. 3 years of holding his hand through war councils and victory feasts. 3 years of believing that when Carun Valanthor looked at her, he saw his future. Serena Ashford remembered the exact moment she stopped believing. It was not the whispers that reached her first. It was the silence. The way conversations died when she entered a room. The way the elders averted their eyes during the morning assemblies. The way her own handmaiden trembled when helping her dress, as if preparing a body for burial rather than a Luna for court. She had dismissed it. Paranoia, she told herself, the weight of responsibility playing tricks on her mind. But then came the night of the Crimson Moon. Every wolf in the Valanthor territory had gathered in the Great Hall. Thousands of eyes reflecting firelight. Thousands of hearts beating as one. This was the night Carun would formally announce their mating ceremony date. This was the night Serene would finally become what she had been promised, his queen, his equal, his Luna in name and bond. She had chosen her gown carefully, deep emerald silk that matched the color of her wolf's eyes. Her dark hair was woven with silver thread, cascading down her back like a midnight waterfall. She looked every bit the queen she was destined to become. Carun stood at the head of the hall, his presence commanding silence without a single word. He was magnificent in his power. Broad shoulders carrying the weight of 5 territories. Steel-gray eyes that could gentle a crying pup or freeze a challenger's blood. When those eyes found hers across the crowded hall, Serene's heart swelled with familiar warmth. He loved her. She was certain of it. "My people!" Carun's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. "Tonight, I must share news that will shape the future of our bloodline." Serene straightened her spine, preparing to walk forward and take her place beside him. "The goddess has blessed us," he continued, and something in his tone made her pause. There was no warmth in it, no joy, only the edge of calculated duty. "An heir grows even now, a child of my blood, a future Alpha King." The hall erupted in howls of celebration, but Serene had stopped breathing. An heir, a child. She pressed her hand against her own flat stomach. They had not yet completed the mating bond. They had not yet shared that intimacy. Carun had insisted on waiting until the ceremony, until everything was proper and blessed by the moon goddess. So whose child was he speaking of? The crowd parted like a sea before a ship, and Serene watched a woman glide forward through the path they created. She was small, delicate, with hair the color of autumn wheat and eyes like polished amber. Her hand rested protectively over the slight curve of her belly. Serene did not recognize her, but she recognized the look on Carun's face as he watched the woman approach. It was the look she had spent 3 years believing was reserved for her alone. "This is Vendara Morath," Carun announced, his hand reaching out to draw the stranger close. "She carries my firstborn son. The healers have confirmed it." The world tilted. Serene felt hands steadying her. Mira, her handmaiden. The girl was crying. "I'm so sorry," Mira whispered. "I wanted to tell you. They made us swear silence. I'm so sorry, my lady." But Serene could not hear her, could not hear anything but the roaring in her own ears and the sound of her heart cracking down the middle. 3 years. She had given him 3 years of her life, her loyalty, her love, and he had announced another woman's pregnancy before he had even bothered to tell Serene it was over. Carun's eyes finally found hers again across the celebrating crowd. She searched his face for guilt, for shame, for any sign of the man who had whispered promises against her hair in the quiet hours of morning. She found nothing. Only the detached calculation of a king who had made his choice. "Serene?" Her name on his lips sounded like a dismissal. "We should speak privately." But Serene Ashford had been raised in the warrior traditions of Ashbourne. Her father had taught her that a wolf never showed weakness before enemies. Her mother had taught her that dignity was armor no blade could pierce. She lifted her chin. She unclenched her fists. And she smiled. "Congratulations, my king. she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet hall. May the goddess bless your heir. Then she turned and walked out of the great hall with her spine straight and her head high. She made it all the way to her chambers before she collapsed. What Serena did not know, what no one in that hall knew, was that the child Vendera carried was not Karen's only secret, and the enemy watching from the shadows had been waiting for exactly this moment. Serena did not sleep that night. She sat at the window of her chambers, watching the moon trace its path across the sky, and she tried to understand how 3 years could collapse into nothing in the space of a single breath. She had met Karen when she was 19, a newly shifted Omega from a minor noble bloodline. The Ashbourne pack was small, nestled in the northern mountains, known for producing fierce warriors but little political influence. Serena had been sent to the Velenthor court as a gesture of alliance, a symbol, nothing more. She had expected to fade into the background of the glittering court. Another forgettable face among hundreds. But Karen had noticed her. She still remembered the first time he spoke to her. She had been standing alone at a hunt celebration, uncomfortable in borrowed finery, counting the minutes until she could escape to somewhere quiet. He had appeared beside her like a shadow given form. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else," he had said. "I would rather be hunting than celebrating the hunt," she had replied without thinking. Most alphas would have been offended by her bluntness. Karen had laughed. That laugh had been the beginning of everything. He had courted her slowly, carefully, as if she were something precious that might shatter if handled wrong. He had asked her opinions on pack disputes. He had walked with her through the gardens at midnight, pointing out constellations and telling her the old stories behind their names. He had looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life, and fool that she was, she had believed him. Now Serena pressed her forehead against the cold glass and forced herself to think clearly. Vendera Morath. The name meant nothing to her. The woman had appeared from nowhere, carrying a child that was at least 3 months along based on the curve of her belly. 3 months. 3 months ago, Karen had been with Serena at the eastern border negotiations. They had spent 2 weeks in close quarters, sharing meals and making plans for their future. At least, she had been making plans. Where had he found time to bed another woman? To get her with child? To arrange this entire public spectacle? Unless it had been happening for much longer than 3 months. Unless the tender courtship, the whispered promises, the patient waiting. Unless all of it had been a carefully constructed lie. A knock at her door scattered her thoughts. "Enter," she said, not bothering to turn from the window. The scent reached her before the voice did. Cedar and iron, the smell of the royal guard. "My lady." It was Brenneth, the captain of her personal escort. His voice was rough with something that might have been guilt. "The king requests your presence in his study." "Does he? He says it is urgent." Serena finally turned from the window. Brenneth stood rigid in the doorway, a man who had sworn his life to her protection now unable to meet her eyes. "Did you know?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "My lady." "A simple question, Captain. Yes or no?" The silence was answer enough. "I see." Serena rose from her seat, smoothing the wrinkled silk of her gown. She had not changed from the celebration. She would not change now. Let Karen see exactly what he had discarded. Lead the way. The walk to the king's study had never felt so long. Every guard they passed looked anywhere but at her face. Every servant pressed themselves against the walls as if her mere presence had become something shameful. By the time Brenneth opened the study door, Serena had counted 17 people who could not meet her eyes. 17 people who had known before she did. Karen stood behind his desk, backlit by the dying fire in the hearth. He looked tired. "Good. Leave us," he told Brenneth. The door closed with the soft click of a cage locking shut. "Serena." Karen's voice was gentle. That gentleness made her want to scream. "I know this is not how you imagined learning." "How long?" He stopped. "What? How long have you been betting her? How long have you been planning this? How long have you been lying to my face while I played the fool before your entire court? Something flickered across his face. It might have been shame. It might have been annoyance at being interrupted. It's complicated. Then simplify it. He exhaled heavily, running a hand through his dark hair. Vendara is from the Morath bloodline. Do you understand what that means? Sereni knew her histories. The Morath line had produced more Alpha Kings than any other bloodline in the last 5 centuries. Their wolves were stronger, their instincts sharper, their children almost guaranteed to carry dominant alpha genes. You bred her for politics, Seren said flatly. I bred her for legacy. Karen's eyes hardened. You are an Omega from a minor house. Beautiful, yes. Intelligent, yes. But your bloodline offers nothing to strengthen our heirs. The council has been pressuring me for years to secure the succession. And you never thought to mention this pressure to me? I thought I had more time. I thought... He stopped himself, took a breath. Vendara was supposed to remain secret until after our mating ceremony. You would have been Luna. She would have been a consort in the background. The child would have been legitimized quietly. No one needed to be humiliated. Sereni stared at him. He actually believed this was a reasonable explanation. So your plan, she said slowly, was to marry me while another woman carried your child, to let me believe I was your chosen mate while you visited her in secret, to make me Luna of a lie. To protect you, he insisted, to give you everything you wanted. What I wanted, Seren cut in, her voice finally breaking, was you. Only you. And you were never mine at all, were you? Karen reached for her. She stepped back, as if his hand were a blade. Sereni, please. This doesn't have to end us. We can still... Still what? She laughed, and the sound was hollow. Still pretend? Still perform for your court while she grows round with your heir? Still warm your bed on the nights you can spare from your pregnant consort? I am trying to offer you a future. You are offering me scraps from another woman's table. Sereni moved toward the door. I may be an Omega from a minor house, but I am not a dog to be grateful for bones. If you walk out that door... Karen's voice dropped to a growl, the alpha command rumbling beneath it. You walk out on everything. Your position. Your title. Your protection. Sereni paused with her hand on the door handle. She looked back at the man she had loved for 3 years, and she felt something inside her go quiet and still and impossibly distant. Then I walk, she said. She did not see the figure watching from the shadows of the courtyard below, but he saw her, and he smiled. 3 days. That was how long Seren was given to remove herself from the Valanthor Palace. 3 days to pack the remnants of a life she had spent 3 years building. 3 days to decide where an Omega, without pack, without title, without protection, would go. Her father was dead. Her mother had followed him into the earth 6 months later. The Ashbourne pack had been absorbed into Valanthor territory as part of her betrothal agreement. There was no home to return to. She had nothing, and everyone in the palace seemed determined to remind her of it. The servants who had once rushed to fulfill her requests now pretended not to hear her voice. The nobles who had competed for her attention now turned their backs when she passed. Even her own handmaiden Mira had been reassigned to Vendara's service. I begged them. Mira had whispered through tears. I told them I wanted to stay with you, but the king's orders... I understand, Sereni had said, and she did. Loyalty was a luxury for those with power. Mira had a family in the lower district. She could not afford to be cast out alongside a disgraced almost Luna. By the second night, Serena had stopped leaving her chambers. There was nothing left to arrange. Her belongings fit into 2 small trunks. Her future fit into nothing at all. She was sitting at her window again, watching the distant tree line, when she caught the scent. Wrong. Every instinct she possessed screamed the word. The scent was wolf, unmistakably, but layered beneath it was something foreign, something that did not belong within Valanthor borders. Enemy. Sereni's hand moved to the knife she had started keeping at her hip. She rose slowly, silently, turning toward the door. I would not bother with the blade. The voice came from behind her, from the window she had just been sitting beside. Sereni spun. A man crouched on her windowsill like a gargoyle come to life. He was dressed in traveling leathers the color of dried blood, and his hair was the deep black of a moonless night. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were gold. Not the amber of a common wolf, not the yellow of a shifted beta. True gold, burning like coins left too long in flame. She had heard stories of eyes like those. Drakenmore. The enemy kingdom to the west had been at war with Valanthor for generations. Their wolves were said to be savage, their alphas merciless, their territory a wasteland of blood and betrayal. And their royals were marked by golden eyes. You're rather calm, the man observed, tilting his head like a predator assessing prey. I expected screaming, perhaps some dramatic throwing of objects. Would screaming make you leave? No. Then it would be a waste of breath. Sereni kept her hand on her knife despite his words. Who are you? The man smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Kieran Drakenmore, he said, and the name landed like a death sentence. Alpha of the Western Blood, commander of the Savage Legions, the wolf your king has been trying to kill for the last decade. Sereni's heart hammered against her ribs. She was standing alone in her chambers with the most wanted wolf in 5 territories, a wolf whose head carried a bounty large enough to buy a small kingdom, a wolf who, if the stories were true, had torn out the throats of 30 Valanthor soldiers with his bare hands. If you're here to kidnap me for ransom, she said, forcing her voice steady, I should warn you that my value dropped significantly 3 days ago. Kieran laughed. It was a warm sound, completely at odds with his reputation. I am aware of your circumstances, Lady Ashford. Your humiliation has been the talk of every spy network on the continent. He swung his legs inside, stepping down from the windowsill with predatory grace. The chosen Luna, cast aside for a better womb. It makes for compelling gossip. Then you know I have nothing to offer you. On the contrary. Kieran moved closer, and Sereni forced herself not to retreat. You have something I want very badly. And what would that be? Revenge. The word hung in the air between them. You want to hurt Kieran, Kieran continued, his golden eyes never leaving hers. You want him to feel even a fraction of what he made you feel in that hall. You want him to understand exactly what he threw away. Sereni said nothing, because he was not wrong. I can give you that, Kieran said softly. I can give you power, protection, and a pack that will value you as you deserve. All I ask in return is your knowledge of Valanthor's defenses, Karen's weaknesses, and your presence at my side when I finally march on his precious kingdom. You want me to betray my people? Your people? Kieran's smile sharpened. Your people turned their backs on you the moment Karen displayed his pregnant consort. Your people cannot meet your eyes in the hallways. Your people are packing you off to obscurity like soiled laundry. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Those are not your people, Lady Ashford. Those are your jailers. Sereni's throat tightened. He was manipulating her. She knew he was manipulating her. Every word was calculated to exploit her anger, her grief, her wounded pride. But that did not make him wrong. Why should I trust you? She asked. You're the enemy. You could be lying about everything. I could be, Kieran agreed easily. But consider this. Karen lied to you for months, perhaps years, while professing love. I am offering you a transaction. Honest betrayal in exchange for honest revenge. No pretense. No false promises of affection. His golden eyes gleamed. Which of us is truly the more dangerous liar? Sereni looked at this man, this enemy, this wolf who had somehow infiltrated the most heavily guarded palace in the kingdom just to speak with her. She thought of Karen's distant eyes in the great hall. She thought of Vendara's hand on her rounded belly. She thought of 17 people who could not meet her gaze. If I say no? Then I leave the way I came, and you proceed with your exile to whatever forgotten corner of the world will have you." Kirin shrugged. "No harm will come to you from me or mine. You have my word." The word of a Drakenmoor wolf. The word of a wolf who has never broken an oath. His expression sobered. "Ask anyone, Lady Ashford. Even my enemies. Kirin Drakenmoor does not lie." Sereni stared at him for a long moment. Then she released her grip on the knife. "I'm not saying yes," she said slowly. "But I'm not saying no either. If I were to consider your offer, I would need guarantees. I would need to know exactly what you plan to do with the information I provide." Kirin's smile returned, wider than before. "Then allow me to show you." He extended his hand toward her. "Come with me tonight. See my territory. Meet my people. If you do not find what you seek, I will personally escort you back to Valanthor's border by morning, and no one will ever know you left." His hand hovered in the air between them. Behind her, the palace slept peacefully, unaware that its darkest enemy stood in their midst. Ahead of her, there was only uncertainty, and the wild, terrifying possibility of a life built on her own terms. Sereni thought of her father, who had taught her that honor meant nothing if it cost you everything. She thought of her mother, who had whispered on her deathbed that the goddess helped wolves who helped themselves. She thought of the girl she had been 3 days ago, and the hollow creature she had become. Then she placed her hand in Kirin Drakenmoor's grip. "Show me," she said. Neither of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from the far corner of the room and slipped through the door to report what it had witnessed. The game had only just begun. The journey west took 3 hours by wolf. Serena had not shifted in weeks. The palace had frowned upon it, considering the act too primal for a future Luna. But running beside Kirin through the midnight forest, her paws striking the earth in rhythm with her thundering heart, she remembered why her wolf had always felt more like home than any marble hall. Kirin's wolf was massive. She had expected that. Alpha kings were always larger than their subjects, their wolves reflecting the dominance that coursed through their blood. But there was something different about the way he moved. Most alphas ran as if they owned the ground beneath them. Kirin ran as if the ground was merely borrowing space from him. They crossed the border an hour before dawn. Serena felt it the moment they entered Drakenmoor territory. A shift in the air itself, as if the land here breathed differently. The stories claimed the Western Kingdom was a wasteland, barren, brutal, soaked in the blood of endless conflict. The stories were wrong. The forest gave way to rolling hills covered in wildflowers that glowed silver under the fading moon. Rivers cut through the landscape like ribbons of liquid starlight. In the distance, mountains rose against the horizon, their peaks crowned with snow that gleamed pink as the first hints of sunrise touched the sky. It was beautiful. Sereni stumbled slightly, her wolf form faltering in surprise, and Kirin's massive black wolf glanced back at her with what she could swear was amusement. They shifted at the base of a cliff face that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. Kirin produced traveling clothes from a hidden cache, simple but well made, in colors that would blend with the terrain. "Not what you expected?" he asked, watching her take in the landscape. "I was told your territory was dying, that your people were starving and desperate. You were told what Valanthor wanted you to believe." Kirin began climbing a narrow path carved into the cliff. "Come. We're almost home." Home, it turned out, was built into the mountain itself. The path wound upward until it reached a seemingly solid wall of rock. But Kirin pressed his hand against a specific formation, and the stone groaned open to reveal a passage lit by phosphorescent crystals embedded in the walls. Serena followed him through the passage, her breath catching as it opened into an enormous cavern. No, not a cavern. A city. Buildings had been carved directly from the mountain's interior, rising in tiers around a central lake that reflected the glow of thousands of crystal formations above. Bridges arched between structures, and wolves moved along pathways at every level, their voices creating a constant hum of life. "Welcome to Thornhaven," Kirin said. the heart of the Drakenmore kingdom. Sereni could not speak. She had seen the Valanthor Palace in all its gilded glory. She had attended the grand courts of 3 allied territories. Nothing had prepared her for this. How? She finally managed. How does no one know this exists? Because we want it that way. Kirin led her down a wide staircase toward the lake. The surface territories your people fight over are decoys. The real Drakenmore has been here for 6 centuries, growing stronger while our enemies believe us weakened. But the battles, the soldiers. Valanthor has killed hundreds of your wolves. Volunteers. Everyone. Kirin's voice carried no bitterness, only quiet pride. Wolves who chose to die maintaining our secret rather than risk exposure. Their sacrifice keeps Thornhaven hidden. Serena thought of how Valanthor spoke of Drakenmore wolves. Savages, they called them, animals without honor or intelligence. She was beginning to understand how thoroughly she had been deceived. They reached the edge of the lake, where a small boat waited. Kirin helped her aboard, taking up the oars himself rather than summoning a servant. Where are we going? To meet someone who will answer the questions burning behind your eyes. He rowed with smooth, practiced strokes. You want to know about Vendara, about the child she carries, about why I really came for you? Serene's stomach tightened. You said you wanted revenge. I do, but not only for myself. The boat glided toward a structure built on an island at the lake's center. A building that seemed older than everything around it, its stone worn smooth by countless years. Vendara Morath is not what she appears to be, Lady Ashford. And the child growing in her womb is not what Karen believes it to be either. What do you mean? The boat reached the island's edge. Kirin secured it to a post and helped Sereni onto solid ground. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I had a sister. Her name was Senna. She was gentle where I am hard, trusting where I am suspicious. She believed that peace between our kingdoms was possible, that love could bridge any divide. His jaw tightened. She fell in love with a Valanthor noble who visited our border under a flag of truce. He swore he loved her too. Swore he would find a way to end the war so they could be together. Sereni felt cold spreading through her chest. What happened? She went to him, crossed the border alone, believing he would protect her. Kirin's golden eyes had gone flat and empty. They found her body 3 days later, what was left of it. I'm sorry, Sereni whispered. The noble who lured her was following orders from Kirin himself. Kirin turned toward the ancient building. Your beloved king used my sister's heart to assassinate her, and I have spent 3 years planning my response. He pushed open the door. Inside, a single figure waited in a chair beside a crackling fire. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her hair pure white. But her eyes were golden, burning with intelligence and power. Grandmother, Kirin said, I have brought her. The old woman studied Serena with an intensity that felt like being examined by the goddess herself. Yes, she finally said, her voice like dried leaves scraping stone. Yes, she will do nicely. A smile crossed her weathered face. Come, child, sit. Let me tell you who Vendara Morath really is. Sereni sat. Vendara is not from the Morath bloodline, the old woman began. She is not even Valanthor born. She is one of ours. A Drakenmore wolf trained from childhood for a single purpose. The fire crackled. Sereni's heart stopped. She is a weapon, the grandmother continued, planted in Karen's bed to conceive a child that will carry our blood onto his throne. A child who will grow up as his heir, taught to love him, to follow him, until the day that child reaches maturity and tears the Valanthor kingdom apart from within. Sereni gripped the arms of her chair as the truth rearranged everything she thought she knew. Karen had not betrayed her for a better bloodline. He had been betrayed himself. And she had just allied with the wolves who were destroying him. The fire seemed to dim as the weight of revelation settled over Serena. You planted an assassin in his bed, she said slowly. You bred a child specifically to destroy him. We planted a future, the grandmother corrected. Vendara is no assassin. She is a mother-to-be who genuinely believes she loves Karen. We raised her to believe it. Her emotions are real, even if the circumstances that created them were carefully designed. That's monstrous. That is war. The old woman's golden eyes showed no remorse. Karen murdered my granddaughter using false love as his weapon. We have merely returned the favor with greater patience and precision. Sereni looked at Karen, searching for some sign of discomfort with this plan. She found none. You knew, she said. When you came to my window, you knew that Vendara was one of yours. You knew the child wasn't cementing Karen's legacy. It was ending it. I knew. Then why bring me here? Why tell me any of this? Her voice rose despite her efforts to control it. If your plan is already in motion, what could you possibly need from me? Kieran exchanged a glance with his grandmother. Because, the old woman said, there is a complication. She lifted her hand, and a servant emerged from the shadows carrying a wooden box. The grandmother opened it, revealing a crystal vial filled with dark liquid. This was recovered from Vendara's quarters 6 days ago. One of our observers managed to obtain it during a search. Sereni studied the vial. What is it? Poison. Specifically, a compound called Widow's Lament. It causes slow deterioration of the womb over a period of weeks. By the time symptoms become apparent, the damage is irreversible. The implications crashed over Serene like a wave. Someone is trying to kill the child. Not trying, succeeding. The grandmother's voice hardened. Vendara has been consuming this poison without her knowledge for approximately 2 weeks. Our healers estimate the child will not survive another month. But who? That is what we do not know. Kieran stepped forward, his presence radiating frustration. Our observer found the poison but could not identify who planted it. Someone within Velenthor's inner circle is aware that Vendara is not what she seems, and they are eliminating the threat. Sereni's mind raced. The council. Karen mentioned they pressured him about succession. Maybe one of them discovered the truth. Perhaps. Or perhaps Karen himself discovered the deception and is quietly eliminating the evidence while maintaining his public announcement. He wouldn't... Sereni stopped herself. Would he? 3 days ago, she would have sworn Karen was incapable of cruelty. 3 days ago, she had believed he loved her. I don't understand, she said finally. Even if I wanted to help you, even if I agreed that Karen deserves whatever fate you're planning, what can I do? I've been banished. I have no access to the palace, no allies among the nobles, no power whatsoever. The grandmother smiled. You have something better than power, child. You have motivation. She gestured toward Serene. You are the wronged woman, the humiliated Luna. Every wolf in Velanthor feels pity for you or guilt for having witnessed your shame. If you were to return, claiming forgiveness in your heart, seeking to serve the kingdom despite your personal pain, they would welcome me back, Serene finished, understanding dawning, the perfect picture of noble sacrifice. Karen cannot refuse you, not publicly. It would make him appear cruel, which would undermine the image he has carefully cultivated. Kieran moved closer, his voice dropping. You would have access again. Access to Vendara's quarters. Access to the council chambers. Access to private correspondence. Everything we need to identify who is poisoning our agent and why. You want me to spy for you. I want you to save an innocent child who has done nothing wrong except exist. Kieran held her gaze. Whatever Vendara is, whatever purpose she was created to serve, the baby in her womb is blameless, and someone is murdering it slowly, day by day, while your former king smiles for his court. Sereni closed her eyes. She thought of her own mother, who had wanted children desperately and had only managed to carry one pregnancy to term. She thought of the women she had known who lost babies, how the grief had hollowed them out from the inside. She thought of a child who would never draw breath because someone decided it was politically inconvenient. If I do this, she said slowly. If I find out who is behind the poison, what then? What happens to Vendara? To the child? If the child survives, we proceed with our original plan. The grandmother's voice was matter of fact. If it does not, we find another way to achieve our goals. Either path leads to Karen's eventual downfall. And me? You will have a place among us, a position of honor, a pack that will never cast you aside for political convenience. Kieran extended his hand toward her. You will have purpose, Sereni, not as someone's ornament, but as a wolf who matters. A wolf who matters. When had anyone last made her feel like she mattered? Serena opened her eyes. She looked at Kieran's offered hand, at his grandmother's patient smile, at the vial of poison that represented a child slowly ending life. She thought of Karen's distant eyes in the great hall. She thought of dignity as armor. She thought of her father's voice. Honor means nothing if it costs you everything. I want 3 conditions, she said. Kieran's eyebrows rose. Name them. First, if I find evidence that Karen himself is behind the poisoning, you let me confront him before you act. I want to see his face when he realizes what he's done. Agreed. Second, if the child survives, I want your word that it will be raised knowing its true heritage. No more lies. No more manipulation. Let the child choose its own path. The grandmother's eyes narrowed, but Kieran spoke before she could object. Agreed. If the child survives, we will tell it the truth when it comes of age. And third. Sereni stood, squaring her shoulders. Whatever happens, wherever this path leads, I am not your pawn. I am your ally. You consult me. You respect my judgment. You treat me as an equal. Kieran studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A genuine smile that transformed his face from predator to something almost warm. Agreed, he said. Welcome to the pack, Lady Ashford. As their hands clasped in agreement, neither noticed the grandmother's fingers tighten on her chair. She had not revealed everything. The poison was not the only threat facing the child. And Sereni Ashford was walking into a web far more tangled than she could possibly imagine. Sereni returned to Valanthor as the sun set on her final day of exile. Kieran had arranged everything. A fresh gown in soft rose that made her appear vulnerable and forgiving. A story about wandering the forest in grief before being found by kind travelers. A letter of humble apology written in her own hand, requesting an audience with the king. The letter had been delivered by a Drakenmore spy embedded in the palace staff. Within hours, a response had come. Karun would see her. Now Sereni stood in the entrance hall where she had walked so many times before, watching the courtiers pretend not to stare. The whispers followed her like shadows. She's back. Did you hear she was found half-mad in the woods? The king must feel guilty. Pathetic, really. Has she no pride? Seren let them whisper. Let them believe she was broken and desperate. The weaker they thought her, the less they would watch. Brenneth met her at the foot of the grand staircase. The captain of her former guard looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. My lady, he said stiffly, the king awaits you in the receiving room. Thank you, Captain. She began to climb. My lady. Brenneth's voice stopped her. I wanted to say. Sereni turned. The man who had been sworn to protect her could barely meet her eyes. I know you knew, she said quietly. I know you all knew. I'm not here for apologies, Captain. I'm here because I have nowhere else to go. She continued up the stairs without waiting for his response. The receiving room was smaller than the study, more intimate. It was where Karun met with people he wanted to appear approachable to, people he was trying to charm or manipulate. The fact that he had chosen this room told Sereni everything about his intentions. He was standing by the window when she entered, silhouetted against the dying light. He turned at the sound of the door, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Relief? Desire? She could not tell anymore. Seren. His voice was careful. I wasn't certain you would return. Neither was I. She kept her eyes downcast, her posture submissive. Let him see what he expected to see. But I had nowhere else to go, and I realized, during those hours alone in the forest, I was wrong to leave. Karen moved closer. Wrong? You are my king. You have been my king for 3 years. Whatever our personal circumstances, I swore to serve this pack. She finally raised her eyes to meet his. I cannot stop loving you simply because you made a difficult choice. I cannot turn my back on everything we built, because another woman will carry your heir. Serena. His voice softened, and she saw the old Kirun, the one who had courted her with starlight and whispers, emerge from behind the mask of the king. You have every right to hate me. Perhaps, but hatred serves nothing. She took a breath, letting her voice tremble just slightly. I am asking for a place here, not as your Luna. I know that position is no longer mine, but perhaps I could serve in some other capacity. An advisor, a companion, whatever you would allow. Karen studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out and cupped her face in his hands. The touch that had once set her soul on fire now made her skin crawl. But she held still. Let him believe his touch still had power over her. My sweet Serena, he murmured, always so devoted, so forgiving. It's one of the things I love about you. Love. The word tasted like poison in the air between them. I cannot make you Luna, he continued. The council would never allow it, and Vendara, the situation is complicated. But I will not cast you out. You have been too faithful for that. Whatever you decide, I will accept. Then you will stay. He released her face, stepping back with the expression of a man who had solved an inconvenient problem. I will have quarters prepared for you in the East Wing. You may resume your duties as my personal advisor. You always did have a clever mind for politics. You are generous, my king. I am practical. His eyes glittered. A woman scorned is dangerous, Serena. Better to keep you close where I can see you than to wonder what you might be plotting in exile. So he was suspicious. Not enough to refuse her return, but enough to keep her under observation. Good? It meant he was not as complacent as she had feared. It meant this game would require every ounce of cunning she possessed. I understand, she said softly. I will earn your trust again, my king, however long it takes. Karen smiled, that handsome, practiced smile she had once believed was genuine. I look forward to it. He summoned a servant to escort her to her new quarters, smaller than her previous rooms, further from the center of power, but still within the palace walls, still within reach. As Serena followed the servant through familiar hallways, she caught a glimpse of a woman descending a staircase across the courtyard. Vendara Marath. The woman who had stolen her future was even more beautiful up close. Golden hair caught the last rays of sunlight, and her amber eyes seemed to glow with contentment. Her hand rested on the swell of her belly, a belly that was slowly being poisoned by someone within these walls. Vendara glanced up. Their eyes met. For a single heartbeat, something passed between them, recognition of a kind, though Vendara could not possibly know who Sereni truly was or what she represented. Then Vendara smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad, and nothing like the triumphant smirk Sereni had expected from the woman who had replaced her. You must be Seren, Vendara said softly. I've heard so much about you. I'm sorry for how things happened. She was sorry. The woman carrying the weapon that would destroy Karen's kingdom was sorry for breaking Sereni's heart. Thank you, Sereni managed. I wish you and the child well. Vendara's hand tightened on her belly, and for a moment, her expression flickered with something that looked almost like fear. I hope so, she whispered. I truly hope so. Then she continued down the stairs, leaving Sereni staring after her. In the shadows of an alcove, a figure watched the exchange. The same figure who had observed Sereni's meeting with Kiran 3 nights before. the same figure who had arranged for the vial of Widow's Lament to find its way into Vendara's food. And now, that figure smiled. Because Serena Ashford had just walked directly into the trap. Sereni spent her first week back in the palace learning to be invisible. It was easier than she expected. The courtiers who had once competed for her attention now treated her as a ghost, present but not worth acknowledging. The servants who had bowed to her every whim now offered only perfunctory nods before hurrying past. Even Carun, despite his promise to keep her close, rarely summoned her. She was forgotten. And forgotten wolves could go anywhere. She began with the kitchens. The palace employed 47 kitchen staff, from the head chef down to the children who scrubbed pots. Any one of them could have access to Vendara's food, but poison required knowledge, and knowledge left traces. On the third night, she found what she was looking for. A locked cabinet in the herbalist's quarters, tucked behind jars of medicinal powders and dried leaves. The lock was simple. Her father had taught her to pick worse. And inside, she discovered a leather journal filled with cramped handwriting. Sereni smuggled the journal to her room and spent hours deciphering its contents. Most entries were mundane, recipes for healing salves, notes on which herbs treated which ailments, but near the back she found a section written in different ink, the handwriting shakier. Widow's Lament. Preparation requires 3 weeks of careful cultivation. Client insists on slow action. Payment received, 200 gold pieces. Target, the foreign woman carrying the king's child. Sereni's heart hammered. The herbalist had been paid. Someone had commissioned the poison specifically for Vendara. But who? The journal offered no names, only the cryptic notation, payment delivered by the Crow. The Crow. Seren had never heard the title before, but she memorized every detail in the journal before returning it to its hiding place. The herbalist could not know she had discovered his secret, not until she understood the full scope of the conspiracy. The next morning, she requested an audience with Vendara. It was a bold move. The entire court would see the former almost Luna seeking company with the woman who had replaced her. The gossip would be vicious. But gossip was currency, and Seren intended to spend it wisely. Vendara received her in a sunlit sitting room decorated with flowers from the palace gardens. The pregnant woman looked tired. Dark circles shadowed her amber eyes, and her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that makeup could not quite conceal. The poison was working. Lady Ashford. Vendara rose with effort, one hand braced against the arm of her chair. I confess, I was surprised by your request. Please, sit. Sereni moved to help her, and the gesture was not entirely feigned. Whatever Vendara was, whatever purpose she served, she was visibly unwell. I should have come sooner. I wanted to clear the air between us. There is nothing to clear. Vendara settled back into her seat with a grimace. You have every reason to despise me. Do I? Vendara's eyes widened slightly at the question. I've had time to think, Sereni continued, taking a seat across from her. You did not choose to fall pregnant. You did not orchestrate my humiliation. You were simply... She paused, choosing her words with care. You were simply in Karen's path when he decided he wanted something different. You give me too much grace. Perhaps. Or perhaps I've realized that directing my anger at you serves nothing. Sereni leaned forward slightly. May I ask you something personal? Vendara hesitated, then nodded. Are you happy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a long moment she simply stared at Sereni, her amber eyes unreadable. I am carrying the future king, she finally said. What more could I want? It was not an answer. Sereni recognized deflection when she heard it. She had perfected the art herself during her years at court. Vendara was hiding something, some truth that lived behind her careful smile and practiced contentment. Forgive me if I overstep, Sereni said gently, but you seem unwell. Have the healers examined you recently? Vendara's hand moved to her belly. The gesture was protective, almost fearful. The healers say everything is fine. The child is strong. I am simply tired. Growing a life takes much from the body. She was lying. Or rather, she was repeating lies she had been told. Sereni wondered if Vendara suspected the truth. If some part of her recognized that her body was failing in ways that normal pregnancy could not explain. The fear in her eyes suggested she did. If you ever need anything, Sereni said carefully. Someone to talk to. Someone who understands what it means to be at Karen's mercy. I am here. Vendara studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took Sereni's hand. You are kinder than I deserve, she whispered. Kinder than anyone here. Her grip was weak. Her fingers were cold. Sereni squeezed gently and tried not to think about how much time this woman, this weapon, this mother-to-be, this pawn in a game she did not even know she was playing, might have left. That night, a note appeared under Sereni's door. 2 words, written in blood-red ink. The crow knows. Sereni did not sleep. She sat in the darkness of her room, the note clutched in her hand, and tried to understand what it meant. Someone knew she was investigating. Someone had seen her take the journal, or had observed her meeting with Vendara, or had simply guessed her purpose. And rather than exposing her to Karun, they had chosen to warn her, or threaten her. The crow knows. Was this a message from the crow themselves? A challenge? An invitation? By morning, she had made her decision. If the crow wanted to play games, Sereni would play. But she would not play blind. She sent a message to Chiron through the hidden channels he had established. A specific arrangement of flowers in her window that would be observed by Drakenmore spies and relayed to their master. His response came faster than she expected. A servant she did not recognize delivered a basket of fruit to her quarters. Hidden beneath the apples was a folded paper. The Crow is a title used by Velenthor's spy master. Current holder unknown. Identity classified at highest levels. Only Karun and his inner council know who wears the mantle. Be careful. You are playing with fire. The spy master. Sereni's blood ran cold. Velanthor's intelligence network was legendary. Their spies had infiltrated every enemy territory, had predicted attacks before they were launched, had assassinated threats before they could materialize. The wolf who commanded that network would be the most dangerous person in the kingdom besides Karen himself, and that wolf was poisoning Vendara's child. Why? If the crow worked for Karun, the poisoning made no sense. Why would Karen announce the pregnancy with such fanfare only to secretly murder the child? The political damage of a miscarriage would be enormous. Unless Karen had discovered Vendara's true origins. Unless he knew she was a Drakenmore weapon and was eliminating the threat while maintaining appearances. But if that were true, why allow Sereni back into the palace? Why not simply execute Vendara outright? Nothing made sense. Serena needed more information. She needed to identify the crow. She began attending every court function, every council meeting she could gain access to, every gathering where the king's advisors might let their guards down. She watched. She listened. She catalogued every suspicious glance, every whispered conversation, every wolf who seemed to know more than they should. It was during a minor celebration, some noble's name day feast, that she finally found her thread. Lord Marden Cray, who had assumed the role of Master of Coin after his predecessor's sudden death, was arguing quietly with Lady Ismara Vex, the kingdom's diplomatic envoy. Their voices were too low to hear clearly, but Sereni caught fragments. Cannot continue. The schedule is fixed. She suspects nothing, but the other one? Lady Ismara's eyes flickered to Seren across the room. The conversation stopped immediately. Both nobles smiled pleasantly and drifted apart, but the damage was done. Serena had seen the recognition in Ismara's gaze, the flash of alarm. They knew something. One of them, or both, was connected to the crow. Serena excused herself from the feast early, claiming fatigue. She made her way through the palace corridors toward her quarters, her mind racing with plans. She would search Ismara's chambers first. The diplomatic envoy traveled frequently, which meant she was accustomed to keeping secrets hidden in portable forms. Documents, letters, something that could... A hand closed over her mouth from behind. Sereni tried to scream, but the sound was muffled. She reached for the knife at her hip, but her arms were pinned before she could draw it. Stop struggling. The voice was female, cool, and achingly familiar. I'm not going to hurt you, Serene, but we need to talk. The hand released her mouth. Serene spun around. Lady Ismara Vex stood in the shadowed alcove, her diplomatic smile replaced by an expression of deadly seriousness. You've been asking dangerous questions, Ismara said. Questions that will get you killed if you keep asking them in the wrong places. Are you the crow? Ismara laughed, a short, bitter sound. No, but I know who is. She glanced down the corridor, ensuring they were alone. I also know what you really are, Sereni Ashford, or should I say, what you've become since your little trip to the Western Territories. Sereni's heart stopped. Oh yes. Ismara's eyes glittered. I know about Kieran Drakenmore. I know about Thornhaven. I know about the grandmother and her schemes. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. I know everything. And if you want to survive the next 3 days, you will listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. In the distance, a clock began to strike midnight. Serena had just discovered that nothing in this palace was what it seemed, including her allies. Ismara led her through passages Serena had never known existed. The palace was ancient, built and rebuilt over centuries of rule, and its walls held secrets that even Karen did not know. They descended through hidden staircases, passed through chambers that smelled of dust and forgotten time, until finally emerging in a room deep beneath the earth. Candles flickered in iron sconces. A table dominated the center of the space, covered in maps and documents and what appeared to be decades of intelligence reports. Welcome to my office, Ismara said dryly. The real one, not the pretty room upstairs where I entertain ambassadors. You're a spy. I'm many things. Ismara moved to the table, shuffling through papers until she found what she was looking for. I was Valanthor's diplomatic envoy for 15 years. I was also, secretly, the primary intelligence gatherer for the previous king, Karen's father. When the old king died, I was supposed to be retired, dismissed. Instead, Karen kept me on, never knowing what I really was. Why are you telling me this? Because I need your help. Ismara thrust a document toward her. Look. Sereni took the paper. It was a genealogical chart, branches spreading across the page in complex patterns. At the center was a name she recognized, Vendara Morath. But the lines connecting her to other names told a story Sereni had not expected. Vendara is not just a Drakenmore plant, Ismara said. She's a direct descendant of the last Valanthor queen, Karen's grandmother. The old king had an affair 40 years ago with a Drakenmore noblewoman. The child of that union was hidden in the West, raised without knowledge of her heritage, and that child eventually gave birth to Vendara. Sereni's head spun. Vendara is Karen's cousin? Second cousin, technically. But yes, the blood of both kingdoms runs in her veins. Ismara's expression darkened. The Drakenmore grandmother, Kieran's grandmother, has known this all along. She didn't plant Vendara simply to create a weapon. She planted her to create a legitimate claim to both thrones. The child, Sereni breathed. The child wouldn't just be Karen's heir. It would have rightful claims to Drakenmore and Valanthor both. A child who could unite the kingdoms, end the war forever, bring peace after generations of bloodshed. Ismara's voice turned bitter. Or, in the wrong hands, become a weapon capable of destroying both kingdoms entirely. Sereni set down the document, her mind racing. Who else knows this? The crow knows. That's why the child is being poisoned. Ismara began pacing. Whoever the crow is, they've concluded that a child with dual claims represents an unacceptable threat to Valanthor's sovereignty. Better a dead heir than one who might someday unite the kingdoms under Drakenmore influence. But Karen announced the pregnancy publicly. If he wanted the child dead. Karen doesn't know. Ismara stopped pacing, facing Sereni directly. That's the piece you're missing. The Crow has been operating without Karen's knowledge for years, making decisions, eliminating threats, shaping the kingdom's future, all while the king believes he's in control. Sereni felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Then who is the Crow? That's what I've been trying to determine for the past 3 months. Ismara's frustration was evident. The previous Crow was Lord Gavrin, the former Master of Coin who preceded Lord Marden. He held the position for 20 years, but he died 6 months ago, supposedly of natural causes. Someone inherited the mantle, but whoever it is has concealed their identity completely. Even I cannot determine who gives the orders now. The note, Seren said suddenly. Someone left a note under my door. The Crow knows. If it wasn't you, it wasn't me. Ismara's eyes sharpened. Show me. Seren produced the crumpled paper. Ismara examined it, her expression growing troubled. This ink. I recognize it. She moved to a shelf lined with bottles and vials, comparing the color. It's specially treated, visible only to wolves with certain bloodlines, a security measure used by the old king's inner circle. What does that mean? It means whoever wrote this note has access to materials that should have been destroyed decades ago. Ismara set down the paper carefully. It means the Crow isn't just some ambitious courtier. There's someone with deep connections to the old regime. Someone who has been waiting, planning, for a very long time. Sereni thought of the poisoned child, the tangled webs of bloodlines and secrets, the grandmother who had admitted she had not revealed everything. There's something else, she said slowly. Kieran's grandmother. She told me about the poison, about Vendara being one of theirs, but she was hiding something. I could feel it. The grandmother always hides something. She's been playing this game longer than anyone. Ismara fixed Serena with a penetrating stare. The question is, which game is she playing? The one where the child survives and unites the kingdoms? Or the one where chaos consumes both sides and Drakenmore emerges from the ashes as the only power left standing? Serena did not have an answer, but she was beginning to realize that she had been a pawn in this game from the very beginning. Not Kieran's pawn, not Karen's pawn, but something older and more sinister. What do you want from me? She asked. I want to find the Crow before the child dies. I want to expose whoever is manipulating this kingdom from the shadows. Ismara's voice hardened. And I want you to help me, because you're the only person in this palace who has nothing left to lose. Sereni thought of Vendara's fingers clutching hers, of the fear in her amber eyes, of the child slowly being murdered in her womb. Tell me what to do, she said. Ismara smiled grimly. First, we need to attend a funeral. Whose funeral? Lord Gavrin's, the former Crow. Ismara's eyes glittered with dark purpose. It's time to dig up some secrets, literally. The cemetery lay beyond the palace walls, a forest of stone markers spreading across a hillside that overlooked the kingdom. Serena and Ismara arrived at midnight, when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds and the only witnesses were the dead. They carried shovels, dark lanterns, and the grim determination of wolves who had crossed too many lines to turn back now. Lord Gavrin's tomb was modest for a man of his position, a simple stone structure with his name and dates carved above the entrance. The door was sealed with iron, but Ismara produced a key from beneath her cloak. Where did you get that? I've been preparing for this moment for months. Ismara unlocked the door with a soft click. I never believed Gavrin died naturally. He was too careful, too paranoid. Someone killed him, and I suspect whoever took his place as the Crow is the same person. The tomb smelled of decay and cold stone. Gavrin's coffin rested on a raised platform in the center, undisturbed since his burial 6 months ago. Help me open it, Ismara said. They worked in silence, prying the lid loose with their shovels until it finally gave way with a groan. Ismara lifted the lantern, illuminating the contents. Lord Gavrin's body had decomposed badly, but enough remained to show what they had come to find. There. Ismara pointed to his throat. See the discoloration? Sereni leaned closer, fighting the urge to gag. A dark stain spread across the corpse's neck. Not the natural discoloration of decay, but something different. Something deliberate. Widow's lament, she breathed. The same poison being used on Vendara. Ismara's voice was tight with vindication. Gavrin was killed by whoever replaced him. They used the signature poison of the Crow's network. A message to anyone who might investigate. A message saying what? That they're not afraid. That they're powerful enough to murder the spy master himself and assume his position without anyone noticing. Ismara began examining the body more closely. Help me check his clothing. Gavrin was paranoid to the point of madness. He would have hidden information somewhere on his person. They searched the corpse methodically, checking pockets, seams, the lining of his burial shroud. It was Serena who finally found it. A thin metal tube sewn into the collar of his shirt. Inside the tube was a rolled piece of parchment. Ismara unrolled it, her eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. As she read, her face went pale. What is it? Names. Ismara's voice was barely a whisper. Every crow who has held the position for the past 200 years. And at the bottom, the name of the wolf he trained to replace him. She turned the parchment so Sereni could see. The name at the bottom made her blood freeze. Successor confirmed. Training complete. Ready to assume mantle upon my death. Brenneth Ironvale. Brenneth. The captain of Sereni's guard. The man who had known about Vendara's pregnancy before Sereni did. The man who had escorted her to Karen's study on the worst night of her life. The man who had been in perfect position to observe her meeting with Chiron through the window. He sent the note, Sereni said, her mind racing. He's been watching me since the beginning. He knew about Kiren. He knows everything. And he's been poisoning Vendara while hiding in plain sight. Ismara's expression hardened. As captain of the royal guard, he has access to every part of the palace, the kitchens, the herbalist, even Vendara's private chambers. No one would question his presence anywhere. But why? Sereni's voice cracked. Why would he kill an innocent child? Because he's not working alone. Ismara rolled up the parchment, tucking it into her cloak. The crow answers to someone. They always have. Gavrin answered to the old king. Brenneth must be answering to someone who has decided the child cannot be allowed to live. Who could command that kind of loyalty? Ismara hesitated. For the first time since Serena had met her, the older woman looked uncertain. There is one possibility, she said slowly, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. The only person with enough power to command the crow, enough influence to orchestrate all of this, enough reason to want both Vendara and her child eliminated. Ismara met Serene's eyes. The grandmother. Kiran's grandmother. The woman who sent you here in the first place. No. Serena shook her head. That doesn't make sense. The child is her weapon. Her plan. Why would she poison her own? Think about it. Ismara's voice was relentless. She told you about the poison. She sent you to investigate. She positioned you perfectly to discover Brenneth's identity. What if she's been manipulating you from the start? Not to save the child, but to expose the truth about Vendara's heritage. Sereni's mind reeled. If the child dies and Karun discovers that Vendara was a Drakenmore plant carrying royal blood from both kingdoms, he would be humiliated. Enraged, he would march to war with a fury that nothing could stop. And in his fury, he would make mistakes, Ismara continued. Mistakes that Drakenmore could exploit. Mistakes that would lead to Valanthor's destruction. The grandmother doesn't want peace through the child, Sereni whispered. She wants war. Total, devastating war. The child was never meant to survive. The tomb suddenly felt like a trap. Sereni had been used. From the moment Kieran appeared at her window, she had been a piece on a board she could not see, moved by hands that cared nothing for her, for Vendara, for anyone but their own ancient grudges. "What do we do?" she asked. Ismara sealed the coffin, her movements efficient and measured. "We have two choices. We can expose everything. The grandmother's plot, Brenneth's treachery, the truth about Vendara's bloodline, and let the chaos fall where it may. Or we save the child ourselves." Ismara's eyes burned with fierce determination. "We find the antidote to Widow's lament. We neutralize Brenneth. We give that baby a chance to be born and make its own choices about what kind of world it wants to live in." Serena thought of Vendara's hand clutching hers. She thought of a child who had done nothing wrong except exist. She thought of her father's voice. "Honor means nothing if it costs you everything. But maybe, just maybe, it could mean something if it saved even one innocent life." "How do we find the antidote?" she asked. Ismara smiled grimly. "That's the hard part." As they slipped from the cemetery into the night, neither noticed the shadow detaching itself from behind a distant mausoleum. Brenneth watched them go, and his hand moved to the blade at his hip. The hunt was about to begin. The herbalist broke within an hour. Sereni had not expected to be capable of what she did in that basement room. The threats, the pressure, the steely determination that transformed her from the gentle Omega everyone believed her to be into something far more dangerous. But her father had taught her more than honor. He had taught her that wolves protect their pack. And somewhere along the way, Vendara and her unborn child had become pack. "The antidote exists," the herbalist gasped, blood dripping from his split lip. Widow's lament was designed with a cure. The crow demanded it. Insurance in case the poison was ever used against the wrong target. "Where is it?" "The crow keeps it. In his personal quarters." Brenneth's quarters. In the heart of the guard barracks. Surrounded by soldiers loyal to him. Serena and Ismara exchanged glances. "How much time does Vendara have?" Ismara demanded. "Days. Maybe less. The poison has reached a critical concentration." The herbalist's eyes were wild with fear. "Even with the antidote, there's no guarantee." "Then we don't have time for subtlety." Sereni straightened, her mind already calculating. "Can you keep him here?" Ismara nodded. "I have people. He won't talk." "Good. I'm going to the barracks." "Alone? That's suicide." "No." Serena met her eyes. "That's necessity. If I take anyone with me, Brenneth will know before we're through the door. But if I go alone, playing the scorned woman seeking comfort from her former guard captain." She smiled grimly. "He's arrogant. He thinks I'm broken. He'll let me in. And once you're in?" "I improvise." Ismara studied her for a long moment. Then she reached beneath her cloak and withdrew a small vial filled with amber liquid. "Moonsbane. 1 drop causes paralysis for approximately 4 minutes. Use it wisely." Sereni took the vial. Her hands were steady. "If I don't return by dawn, get Vendara out of the palace. Get her to Thornhaven. Let Kieran decide what to do with the truth." "And the child?" "The child is why I'm doing this." Sereni moved toward the door. "Some things are worth dying for, Lady Vex. I just never expected to find one in the belly of my enemy." The walk to the barracks was the longest of her life. Every shadow could hide danger. Every guard who nodded in her direction could be loyal to Brenneth. But Sereni kept her pace measured, her expression carefully composed into something wounded and desperate. The role was not difficult to play. She had been wearing it for weeks. Brenneth's quarters were at the end of the guard corridor, behind a heavy oak door marked with the insignia of his rank. Serena knocked softly. "Who is it?" "Serena." She let her voice tremble. "Please, Captain, I need someone to talk to. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see..." A pause. Then the sound of boots approaching. The door opened. Brenneth stood in the doorway, his uniform loosened for sleep, his expression carefully neutral. But his eyes held a flicker of something that might have been triumph. Lady Ashford, it's very late. I know. I'm sorry, She wrapped her arms around herself, the picture of vulnerability. Everyone else looks at me with pity or contempt, but you were always kind to me. You never judged. Something shifted in his expression, not softening, calculating, deciding whether she was a threat or an opportunity. He stepped aside. Come in. The room was sparse but functional. A bed, a desk covered in papers, a weapons rack along one wall, and there, on a shelf beside the desk, several small vials that could easily contain an antidote. I apologize for the mess. Brenneth moved past her, positioning himself between Seren and the desk. A guard captain's work is never finished. Is that what keeps you up at night? Serena drifted closer, her eyes on his face rather than the shelf. The weight of protecting everyone? Among other things. It must be lonely. Having responsibilities no one knows about. Carrying secrets that would destroy everything if they came to light. She saw the exact moment he understood. His hand moved toward his blade, but Serena was faster. The vial of Moonsbane was already open, the amber liquid splashing across his face before he could complete the motion. Brenneth's eyes went wide. His body stiffened, muscles locking in place as the paralysis took hold. He collapsed against the desk, perfectly conscious but utterly unable to move. You're clever, Sereni said, circling him slowly. The perfect crow, hiding in plain sight. Everyone trusted you, even me. His eyes followed her, filled with fury and something else, grudging respect. I know about Gavrin. I know you killed him. I know you've been poisoning Vendara on the grandmother's orders. She knelt beside him, her face close to his frozen features. What I want to know is, why? Why help Drakenmore destroy your own kingdom? She reached into his jacket, finding a small key. The vials on the shelf were locked behind a glass panel. She used the key to open it. Let me guess. The grandmother promised you something. Power? A position in the New Order? Or maybe you're one of them. A Drakenmore wolf who's been embedded here so long everyone forgot where you came from. His eyes flickered. Confirmation. 40 years embedded. Gavrin had never suspected he was training his own replacement. A wolf loyal to the grandmother who had positioned him perfectly to be discovered and mentored into the role of Crow. Interesting. Sereni examined the vials, finding one labeled with symbols she didn't recognize. She pocketed it. Well, your grandmother's plan ends tonight. I'm saving that child. And when Karen learns what you've done, what she's orchestrated, there will be no place in any kingdom where you can hide. Brenneth's fingers twitched. The paralysis was wearing off. Sereni stood quickly. Don't bother trying to stop me. By the time you can move, I'll be long gone. But I want you to deliver a message to your master. She leaned close one final time. Tell her the pawn has left the board. She was through the door before his first strangled cry left his throat. Seren ran through the darkened corridors, the antidote clutched against her heart. Behind her, she heard shouts beginning to rise. The hunt had become a race, and the finish line was Vendara's chambers. Vendara was dying. Sereni could see it the moment she burst through the chamber doors. The gray pallor had spread across her entire face, and her breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. Two healers stood helplessly beside the bed, their expressions confirming what Sereni already knew. Without the antidote, the child would not survive the hour. Everyone out, Sereni commanded. You cannot. Out! The healers fled. Serena locked the door behind them and rushed to Vendara's bedside. Sereni! Vendara's voice was barely a whisper. What are you? Drink this. Sereni lifted her head gently, pressing the vial to her lips. Don't ask questions. Just drink. Vendara drank. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then her body convulsed, her back arching off the bed as the antidote fought against the poison saturating her system. She screamed, a sound of agony that would haunt Sereni's dreams for years to come. Then silence. Vendara collapsed against the pillows, her chest heaving, her eyes fluttering open. Color was already returning to her cheeks. Her hand moved to her belly, and her expression shifted from confusion to wonder. "The child," she gasped. "I can feel... the child is... alive." Sereni sagged with relief. "The child is alive." Pounding erupted against the door, guards demanding entry. Brenneth's voice rising above the chaos, ordering them to break it down. "Seren." Vendara gripped her hand with surprising strength. "What have you done? What's happening?" "I saved your child." Sereni smiled, and for the first time in weeks, the expression felt genuine. "Now I need you to listen carefully. Everything you believe about your life is a lie. Your bloodline, your purpose, even the reason you were sent here. All of it was orchestrated by people who never cared whether you or your child survived." The door shuddered, hinges beginning to give way. "When those guards break through, they're going to arrest me. I need you to protect the child. Trust no one except a woman named Ismara Vex. She will tell you the truth about who you really are." "Who I really am?" "You're not just a pawn, Vendara." Sereni squeezed her hand. "You're the bridge between two kingdoms. Your child could end a war that has lasted generations, but only if you choose to fight for that future instead of letting others choose for you." The door burst open. Guards flooded the room. Brenneth was at their head, his face a mask of cold fury, the paralysis long since faded. "Seize her," he commanded. Hands grabbed Sereni's arms, wrenching her away from the bed. She did not struggle. She had done what she came to do. But before they could drag her from the room, another voice cut through the chaos. "Stop." Karen stood in the doorway. He was dressed for sleep, clearly roused by the commotion, but his presence commanded immediate obedience. The guards froze. "What is the meaning of this?" "My king." Brenneth stepped forward. "Lady Ashford is a traitor. She's been consorting with Drakenmore enemies. She attacked me in my quarters and... she saved my life." Everyone turned to Vendara. The pregnant woman had risen from her bed, color in her cheeks, fire in her eyes. She looked nothing like the pale, dying creature she had been minutes before. "I was being poisoned, Karun. Slowly murdered. Your guard captain knew. He was the one responsible." She pointed at Brenneth with a hand that no longer trembled. "Sereni discovered the truth and brought me the antidote. If she hadn't, our child would be dead by dawn." Karun's face went through a series of transformations. Confusion, disbelief, fury. His gaze moved from Vendara to Sereni to Brenneth. "Is this true?" Brenneth's composure cracked. "My king, she's lying. The Drakenmore woman is manipulating. Answer me." Karen's voice dropped to a deadly growl. "Did you poison the mother of my heir?" Silence. In that silence, Sereni saw Brenneth make his choice. His hand moved toward his blade. He never reached it. Karen was faster than any wolf Serena had ever seen. One moment he was standing in the doorway. The next, his hand was around Brenneth's throat, lifting the captain off his feet. "You will tell me everything," Karen snarled. "Every person involved, every secret you've kept, and then I will decide whether you die quickly or slowly." Brenneth's eyes bulged. He gasped for air. Then he laughed. "You think this ends with me?" Blood bubbled at his lips where he'd bitten his tongue. "The grandmother has been planning this for 40 years. Killing me changes nothing. The war is already..." His words cut off. His body convulsed. White foam poured from his mouth. Poison, hidden in a tooth. The final escape of a crow who would not be captured. Karen dropped the corpse in disgust. In the silence that followed, Sereni met Vendara's eyes across the room. The woman she had been sent to betray. The mother of a child she had almost let die. The bridge between two kingdoms who had just learned her entire life was a lie. Vendara nodded once. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 1 month later. The child was born under a full moon. A girl, healthy and strong, with eyes that shimmered gold in certain light and gray in others. Both kingdoms' blood running through her veins. Both kingdoms' futures resting in her tiny hands. Karen named her Serena, A tribute, he said, to the woman who had saved her life. The war did not end. Not yet. But for the first time in generations, ambassadors from Drakenmoor and Valanthor sat at the same table. Chiron came himself, his golden eyes meeting Serene's across the council chamber with something that might have been gratitude. The grandmother was never found. She had vanished the night Brenneth died, taking her secrets with her. But Serena knew she was still out there, watching, planning, waiting for her next opportunity. Some wars, it seemed, could not be won in a single battle. But as Serene stood beside Vendara, watching the infant Serena sleep peacefully in her cradle, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that this child might grow up in a world without the hatred that had shaped her parents. Hope that love, complicated, messy, imperfect love, might prove stronger than generations of violence. Hope that the pawn who had walked off the board might have changed the game forever. "Thank you," Vendara whispered. Serene smiled. "Don't thank me yet. We still have a grandmother to catch, and 2 kingdoms to save." Vendara laughed, a sound full of strength and determination and the fierce joy of new motherhood. "Then we'd better get started."